Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what is happening? How are you doing today? How is your podcast coming along? I am Chris, and I am from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out every single thing you might want to know about that show on over on the website, which I built all by myself. Check that out at chrisandchristineshow.com. There'll be a link to that into the show notes of this episode. Just scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there it is. So how are you doing? How is your podcast coming along? Do you even have a podcast? Or maybe you're thinking like, you know what? This is the year. Right now, I have something to say, and I'm going to make sure I put it into a podcast. This is your time. This is your opportunity to get this done right now. And I can personally help you figure that out. You see, it's not as complicated as everybody makes it seem to be. It doesn't have to be this big old ordeal. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars on equipment and gear. You don't even need video or camera work. You don't need any of that stuff. In fact, right now, this episode that I'm recording as of right now, I'm using a Zoom PodTrack P4, which is plugged directly into my MacBook, and I'm doing this from my actual dining room of my house is where this actual episode is being recorded today. It's been quite complicated going on over here with people coming and going and people using the studio to stay in and sleep in. We've had 2 different guests over the last week, and so they're all staying with us. So I had to kind of move shop out, and that's a nice thing about having a portable setup like this, especially with the Zoom PodTrack. Now, I know the audio is not as good as it is with a Rodcaster Pro 2, which is phenomenal. I recommend getting that device if you're going to get one. But also, I'm using the Rode PodMics connected directly into the Zoom P4. Now, the deal with the Zoom P4 is that I just checked it again. It was on sale. I think it was somewhere around $150 for this handy-dandy little device. It's basically this tiny little recorder, which is the size of like an old Walkman back in the day. You can record directly onto it, or you can record through it to the computer. You can record your phone, or you record a guest. It does a lot of different things. It's basically the one-stop shop for any podcaster that's just starting out and you do not have a ton of money to do a podcast, but say you have 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 people are going to be on your same show at the same time, then the Zoom PodTrack will get you started. It does a lot of cool things. If you want something more advanced, you might go down the Rode Rodcaster side of the equation. Now, just a little while ago, Rode just announced some really cool new toys coming out of Rode for podcasters and for streamers. The 2 ones that I'm really, really excited about is the Rodcaster Duo, which is like a miniaturized version of a Rodcaster Pro 2. It does all the cool sound effects, all the cool features of a Rodcaster Pro 2, but with only 2 XLR hookups. So basically, it's just a little smaller version. I mean, you can do a lot of cool things. Basically, almost everything you can do with the full Big Daddy, you can do with the Rodcaster Duo. But it's not cheap. I think it's retailing for $500 US right now. In comparison, the Rodcaster Pro 2, I believe, is somewhere in the ballpark of $700, maybe $800, somewhere in that range. I think it's what I paid for mine. I think I paid $700, if I remember correctly, for my Rodcaster Pro 2. So it's not cheap. These are not cheap toys to play with. But check this out. What if I told you there's a brand new microphone coming on the market? I think it's for sale right now, also by Rode, which gives you the same processing power of a Rodcaster built right into a single microphone. Yeah, I'm talking about the brand new Rode PodMic USB. You see, I'm using the Rode PodMic Original, which is the XLR only version. But just imagine if it was just you and you had a laptop and you didn't know if you were ever going to have a guest You're just going to be you doing your Zoom shows or whatever you want to do. It's just you talking to the computer, solo episodes, which are fine. You can totally do that. But you don't want to buy a Rodcaster because you don't need a Rodcaster if it's just you. It's just overkill, right? But one of the cool features about the Rodcaster is that it sounds phenomenal. It's got a lot of cool sound processing built into the thing. So Rode, on the new Rode USB microphone, they took that same technology and kind of put it in a software form. So when you plug in the Rode PodMic USB directly to your USB slot on your computer, I don't have one, but I'm just assuming that it pulls up some kind of program where you can fine tune and really do all the adjustments just like you can on the physical Rodcaster, but it's just a microphone. Now, this microphone is twice as much money as the original PodMic that I'm using right now. The one I'm using right now, it's $100 US, and the new Rode PodMic USB, it's around $200 US. So double the price. But the cool thing about the Rode PodMic USB is that you can still use it like I'm using this one right now. You can hook it up XLR to either a Rodcaster Pro 2 or a Zoom PodTrack or any kind of console you have. You can physically hook that thing up there. Or if you don't have any of those kind of equipment, all you have is a computer. You can still hook it up via USB directly to the computer, and you can have access to all those enhancements, which kind of make it sound really professional, a lot better. That's kind of the downside to the Zoom PodTrack. Even though I love this toy so much, it's that it doesn't have a lot of cool enhancements to the audio. It's got some very basic, it's very basic, and it's only a 16-bit 44.1 hertz rate when it actually records onto it. So it's kind of low quality, but it does sound decent for your average basic podcast. Now, if you want something more advanced, of course, you got to go to the Big Daddy, the Rodcaster Pro 2. But the Zoom P4, I think it's on sale for like $150, maybe $170. I paid like $200 for the thing about 2 years ago. So it kind of dances around. I kind of would hope that maybe sometime soon, Zoom actually creates a new version of the Zoom PodTrack P4. I'm hoping for 48 hertz, and I'm hoping for 24-bit, and I'm hoping for maybe a noise gate. I'm hoping for maybe lots of sound effects. That would be awesome. If they could make the cool sound effects like the Rodcaster has, like all the enhancements, if they could put that stuff into the Zoom PodTrack, holy crap, that'd be amazing. So assuming you got your podcast gear, your podcast is up and running, then what do you do with it? You probably want to grow your show. You probably want better audience engagement, and perhaps maybe you might want to make some cash with this thing. Well, I have got just the perfect guy. I got Adam from Podcasting Business School stopping on by the podcast. We're going to talk all about how you can leverage your show to do all those wonderful things and how it's possible to make some serious money or any kind of money creating a podcast and using your fun hobby podcast and maybe turn it around, eventually turn it into something more serious where you can potentially maybe make some serious money with your podcast if that's what you want to do. So let's bring him on out here. Here is Adam from the Podcasting Business School.
I am doing great, Chris. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to lean into your audience a little bit and see if we can inspire them about maybe making some money or growing their brand via podcasting.
You know, as every podcaster's like dream job goal is to make some money with this hobby they spent some money on. You know, I know some podcasters will dump thousands and like thousands of dollars into their gear, and then they kind of sit at it and they're like, oh, wait a second, I should probably making some money with this stuff I just bought. So, but how long have you been podcasting?
Yeah, I launched my first show back in 2015. And at that time I was a fitness facility owner and I wanted to kind of grow into an online brand presence. And I was really fired up about listening to podcasts. And I thought I could dip my toe in this water and let's see what happens. So it was a weight loss show called The Million Pound Mission. Ooh. And we did almost 400 episodes of that show. So it was pretty successful.
Now, I would think that a weight loss show, especially here in America, because we all know that America, we like to eat, yeah. We're not the thinnest country in the world. And I would think that a weight loss show would be very popular. Was it for you?
Yeah, we did really well with it. With a lot of, similar to a lot of podcast stories, it was a little rough at the beginning because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know any other podcasters. I had no one to help me out. I didn't even know there were podcasts about podcasting like we both have now. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to reverse engineer my favorite shows and going, okay, Tim Ferriss does this, so maybe I'll try that and let's see what happens. So it was a little rough up front. I remember, you'll enjoy this. The first subscriber, the first email that I ever got for that show was titled, "I love your show, but ...
Oh no.
And so the first time I've ever heard from anyone that ever listened to my show, I get this email, I open it, and it's like, hey, I love the energy. I love the inspiration. I'm using some of your strategies and they're working, but I almost wrecked my car because of the sound effect that you put at the end of the new episode. And I thought I had found something that was like, it sounded like a barbell hitting the floor. I'm like, oh, this is a great way to end the show, like mic drop moment or whatever.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand audio leveling. And that mic drop moment was like 10x the volume of my already loud voice. And he's like, it sounded like a shotgun went off inside of my car. And I almost, like, he curbed his car. Oh, I almost killed my first subscriber. So bad start.
Well, then you got to start your funeral podcast after that.
Yeah. I killed my only subscriber podcast, brought to you by Adam Schaeuble.
Well, that actually might be a clever name. Now, when it comes to starting your podcast, I would think that having a very catchy or what are your thoughts on actually the name of your show? Because everybody starts off with thinking, oh, I know the name of my show. It's going to be the Bill and Joe Show.
Yeah. Yeah. So I honestly think podcasters are creative content creators, and our creativity holds us back a little bit. Or creates it. I mean, it could actually create the roadblock that keeps our ideal listeners from finding us because we get too creative with the name, or it's too simple or doesn't attract the right people. So for me, when I'm talking to people about launching shows now, I go, when I read the title of your podcast, I need to know exactly what it's about and who it's for without any extra explanation. If you've got to go into a white paper unpacking of what this is about, then it's not a good name because there's no keywords. People aren't going to be finding it organically. And it's going to be, one of those shows where you have 12 people listen to you for 8 years, and that's not cool. So, so I think really locking into who you're trying to actually reach and thinking about keywords and getting things a little SEO, a little search engine optimized, and that's going to help a lot. But all the creativity out inside of the content that you're actually creating. So kind of vanilla and direct when it comes to naming. Let's get really creative with the actual audio we're laying down.
So speaking of audio, I know a lot of these new shows are doing this whole video style of a show in parallel with their audio show. They'll do like the Zoom chat, and then they will take that whole thing and put it on YouTube, and then they'll have like the audio version of their podcast, the podcast version. Do you think video is necessary to create a decent show or a good show?
I don't think so. I wouldn't let it hold anybody back. I wouldn't want it to hold anybody back from starting a podcast, because I feel like podcast consumers and audio consumers are different than YouTube and video consumers. Like, you have to sit down and look at that video and be like, all right, I'm going to watch this video right now for the next 15 minutes or 60 minutes or 3 hour Joe Rogan, style, whatever.
Who's got time for that?
Yeah. And podcast consumers are multitaskers, and they're driving their kid to school, or they're on their lunch break at work. They're working out, they're walking the dog. And we are on the go, listen at whatever speed you want, which that's kind of one of the podcasting superpowers. When I'm talking to brands or businesses and they're looking to grow their show, I'm like, a lot of people are weighing YouTube versus podcasts. I go, well, here's some of the superpowers. Here's some of the advantages of audio. It's easier to do. You don't have to do as much editing. Editing on YouTube is a freaking nightmare for
to do
most
it right.
people.
I mean, did you have all the graphics and the cool like logos and the cool like thumbnail and and all the sweeping, pictures. And I mean, it's like a full on movie production. If you can't make it look like George Lucas himself made this thing, then don't even bother, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got friends doing YouTube and they will spend 6 hours editing a 15-minute video. And I'm like, not for me. I only work 3 days a week, bro. So like, I don't have time for that.
Living the good life.
Yeah. So I can do, my 2 episodes per week and do all the editing production and have it all wrapped up and done within 2 hours. And I'm got my social media assets or whatever. But like my philosophy is audio first. That's primary concern, but I will live stream my episodes into YouTube, but I don't edit anything. I'm like, it is what it is. I'm in the Google search engine and we're good to go there. And then I will take video clips and I'll put them on social media just for marketing and things like that. So I will use video, but I don't, it's an audio first mindset. My podcast is the tip of the spear for my brand. And that's where I want everyone to start. That's what I want everyone to get obsessed with. And that's just the way my brand and my business kind of operate.
So is it kind of like a business funnel? In other words, like your podcast is the top of the funnel, bringing everybody in and you kind of whittle them down to the actual course or whatever it is that you do?
Yeah. I mean, you can view it as like a really long tail nurturing email sequence. And it's just a couple times a week, I'm going to drop some knowledge on, how to grow a brand or a business with a podcast. And I'm going to show off some expert positioning with like my podcast audit episodes where I'm coaching other podcasters live on the show. So it's expert positioning, it's social proof. It's me, letting them know like, hey, I want to be top of mind when you're ready to take action. And then every once in a while I'll have, a call to action, like for a discovery call. I don't really sell a lot off of my show. I'll have some sort of call to action every single episode, but a lot of times it's for a free downloadable or a discovery session or a free challenge or something like that. Or like I'll just advertise, hey, come on the show for a podcast audit. So I'm building my email list, but that just allows me to nurture even more. I've taken the long approach to this as, a service provider that has programs, products, and services that I can help, people with their business, but I rarely ever really, kind of pimp that out on the show at all. I'm very focused on just providing value and showing off what I can do.
That's fantastic, man. So you said business. I think a lot of your listeners would probably be more of the business style of a podcast, right?
Well, it's not necessarily a business style podcast, but service providers. Yeah. If you've got programs, products, and services, podcasting business school, that, my show is for you 100%. And but we also do talk a lot about download growth. We talk a lot about audience engagement, and every podcaster is looking for tips in that realm.
Okay. So what's your magic bullet? Because I want to get, 10,000 downloads an episode tomorrow. So what do we got to do?
Well, the first thing when it comes to downloads, I always want to map out what is true and what is realistic. Because we hear a lot of podcasters. I'm sure we all have friends that are podcasting like, oh, I'm doing 1 million downloads an episode, and they're just completely full of it.
Oh, really?
I call it pulling down your podcasting pants and showing people what your download numbers actually look like. And I do this on social media. So if you guys follow me on Instagram, I'm screen sharing, live video of like, here's where I'm at right now. And there it is. It says my name. There's my Libsyn account. You can check out and see where I'm at. Because I feel like there needs to be more transparency about that. And a lot of podcasters feel shame that they aren't doing as many downloads as they think they should be doing it. So I'm trying to bring more transparency and honesty to the industry with what I'm doing. But with the download numbers, I know you recently spoke to someone from Libsyn. That's where I get all my information. And, give or take a few downloads, if your show's doing 125 downloads at 30 days post episode release. So every time you release an episode, 30 days after, you're hitting around 125 downloads. That's a top 50% podcast. And if you're doing 1,000 downloads at that 30-day mark on average, you're a top 20% podcast. So you're better than 80% of the podcasters out there. So those are the first two benchmarks I always tell people to shoot for. And that gives a lot of people hope because they're like, wow, I'm already at 75 downloads per episode and I've only got 15 episodes. I thought I was doing terrible, but I'm actually halfway to the top 50% zone or whatever. So I like to throw those numbers out there, and I'm always reminding people about that. And I recently spoke at an event down in Texas, and I saw some people kind of like shrugging off 125. I'm like, what if you could speak to 125 people, step up on this stage and talk to 125 people in this room right now? You'd be psyched about that. So why aren't we excited about that with the podcast? Because it's even better because I can flip on the microphone and drop knowledge from my home office. I don't have to travel anywhere.
Right.
And I've got that captive audience. So those are the two benchmarks that we're shooting for initially. And then when we talk about growth and hitting those marks, I look at 3 lanes. I look at how to leverage other people's podcasts. I look at social media marketing or just marketing, strategies in general. And then I look at paid ad strategies. I'm like, what are we doing in these 3 areas to, gain brand exposure basically and scoop up new listeners? So, I mean, if you want, we can kind of look at each one of those lanes a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be great, man. Because I think every podcaster out there really, no matter what kind of show they have, they want to grow their show and expand and get out there. I know that I'm on social media a lot and I always see, look, new episode drops. Great. But what is your best practices to really market a podcast or any podcast?
Yeah. So let's start in that social media marketing lane. I've got a simple strategy and it works every time. So,
okay. Listen up, guys.
We want the typical podcaster. I really encourage like weekly episode drop. We got to keep in our people's inbox on their phone there as far as like new episode, new content weekly. And usually what people will do is if they release on a Monday, they'll kind of trickle out some promotional assets. There's really 2 things. They either do nothing or they trickle out promotional assets throughout the entire week. And what I like to push my audience to do, I call it my 72-hour marketing strategy. So I challenge my listeners and my clients to release 5 separate marketing assets for that episode within 72 hours of it going live. Because inside of the podcast player apps like Apple and Spotify, when you release new content, there's that newness algorithm that works where if you drive more people to consume that content, they're more likely to share that out. And from what we can tell, it's about 72 hours where that juice is kind of a little bit extra. So instead of marketing it over 7 days, let's market harder over 3 days. Instead of releasing 5 episodes or 5 marketing assets over 5 to 7 days, let's put them all in the first 3 days and really take advantage of that extra drive that the podcast player apps are providing for us. So, and when people hear me say this, the question that pops up is like, well, I've got an Instagram reel that I multi-purpose and I load up to TikTok and Facebook and whatever. But that's one asset on multiple platforms. I want 5 unique assets. So it could be a carousel post. It could be a TikTok video. It could be a live stream. It could be a newsletter, email marketing to your email list. Just different styles, different types of marketing assets. And I want 5 of them in 72 hours. And this tends to work really, really well, Chris. Like people that, I know there's a lot of people listening that probably already do 5 marketing assets and they're just spreading them out over the week and just smush them into 3 days. And you'll see a difference in your downloads almost immediately. And, so driving traffic, giving people a reason to consume that content, that latest episode, it just lets Apple Podcasts, they're going, wow, they're driving activity on our platform. It's just like Instagram. When you get people commenting on your feed, they show your feed to more people.
That's true. I noticed that too. Yeah, the more likes you get, it starts going off. I know I created a reel a while ago and it started going viral. And I think I got somewhere around the neighborhood of, I haven't checked it lately, but I think it had like 25,000 views. And it at first it kind of like started catching like wildfire. I look at my phone and there's like another 1,000 alerts or whatever. I'm all these alerts, and then kind of pause for a minute, and then it started kicking off again with more alerts, and then eventually kept growing. I think it kind of plateaued at like 25,000 or so, but still, I can see what you're saying. The more you kind of spread little, get the fire going, and it kind of spreads out. Yeah. So what else you got?
Okay, so that's just a good general process that you can use for social media marketing. Let's look at other people's podcasts. So obviously being like, I'm a guest on Chris's show now. This is awesome exposure. We are in a similar vein in the podcasting world. And if any of you are inclined to subscribe to my show, that is awesome. And that's kind of what happens when you guest on other people's shows. Now, the issue that people come up with, they're like, but I don't know any other podcasts. I can't afford to pay some PR agency to, get me booked on shows. And those are kind of shady anyway. Like,
Yeah.
They charge a lot of money, and they might go, hey, pay me 10 grand. We'll get you on 10 shows, but they say nothing about actual download numbers. Like, they don't ask these podcasts, how many downloads that episode actually do? They're just getting you booked on shows where,
right. Yeah. Anywhere, like spray and pray, I guess they call it.
Exactly. And those shows might do 12 downloads or 1,000 downloads or 12,000 downloads. We don't know. And so, anyway, I've got issues with that side of the industry that we won't get into. But so we have to think of, how do we get booked on other people's podcasts? So if you've got an interview based show, I did this with my health show. When I first launched, I looked at the Apple top 200 charts, and I was like, I'm going to start at the back edge, like shows ranked 190 to 200. I'm going to look at which ones I think I might be a good potential guest for, but I'm not going to cold ask to be on their show. I'm going to invite them to be on my show first. So I would find 2 or 3. I would send out some invite emails. In the title, it's always, would love to have you as a guest on my show. So that's very obvious. Very few people say no to being a guest on someone else's podcast. Like, we love to talk about ourselves and promote our stuff.
Yeah.
So my main goal was, I'm good at making friends. I'm good at creating content. I'm going to have these people on my show. I'm going to friend them into submission. And, a certain percentage of these people are going to invite me back on their show. And by golly, by the end of that year, I was a guest on 50 of the top 200 podcasts in the health space. And my show went from like 2,000 downloads a month to 25,000 downloads a month, and started ranking and doing all this crazy stuff. And it was just because I was out there inviting first, giving first, and then making friends. And a lot of times, like, wow, this was a really great conversation. I need to create content for my show. Why don't you come on next week? Okay, cool. And it's a little extra work, but my, quote unquote closing ratio of getting booked on these other shows is way higher than spray and pray emails or paying somebody 10 grand to get me booked on random shows. So that tends to work pretty well.
Fantastic. So you're saying, find shows that are similar to your show if you can, and try to find the top 200 and not start with the number 1 show, but kind of go towards the back of the list and try to get a hold of these people and say, hey, I'd love to have you on I'd love to be a guest on your show. Or don't I'd
have them on my show.
Okay. And then in theory, they'd have you on their show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the hope. And sometimes it didn't work out that way, but I had a great episode, and I was doing interviews anyway, so this only made sense. And the cool thing that started to happen, Chris, was like, as I started to work my way up the list, I would gain confidence. And I'd be like, all right, I'd finish an interview, and I'd be like, I noticed that so-and-so was on your show a couple months ago. I really loved that episode. Would you mind making a warm introduction? And, that person might be like, they're like top 50 or a couple of them I got into the top 20, top 10 podcasts. So I kind of got to skip the line with this warm introduction. And I had a couple of, friends I made that had a top 5 or 10 podcasts in the nutrition category. And I made friends with them. They had me on their show. And that's when my show really blew up by kind of just skipping ahead. So getting those warm introductions works really, really well too. So that strategy, it takes a little extra work. It's kind of a longer play, but I've got clients that do this. I've got friends that do this, and it's very doable for any podcaster at any level, and gets you networked into the space really nicely too.
That's amazing, man. Now I'm going to flip this on its head and say, because I know that there's some listeners or some podcasters out there, well, actually a lot of podcasters out there I think about, that try to go after the A-list celebrity or the bigger name celebrity, and hoping that once they do get this person on their show, that their show is just going to skyrocket all of a sudden because they have this big name or multiple names. You ever hear that too?
Oh yeah. So I think the dose of reality that we need to serve up with this idea is that first off, it's going to be hard to get that A-list. It's not impossible. Like I've had a few people on my show that I was like, wow, can't believe, I've read every one of their books. I've bought all of their things. And they said, yes, I can't believe it. And that's always a cool moment.
Right now, I got Adam from Podcast Business School. I'm super excited.
Whatever, Chris. So like sometimes those happen and that's cool, but we always have to keep in mind the purpose of that person coming on our show, like their purpose and our purpose. And the through line for anything that we put out into our RSS feed is to serve the audience. So that's purpose number one. We have to keep that top of mind and be like, listen, I'm not having this person on to make me famous. I'm here to deliver cool content and level up my listener experience. We got to keep that in mind, but we also have to think about their purpose. Like their purpose is to dive into your audience, deliver, and hopefully win over a few audience members back into their audience. And maybe they just released a book and they make some book sales or they got a course or something. And like, that is why they're doing this. And they're not, maybe they're doing it out of the kindness of their heart, but that's probably a lower percentage than scooping up some audience for themselves. So really they are there to scoop up your audience, not to be like your marketing team to grow your audience. And
I think podcasters think it's the other way around. They want the big name on their shows to scoop up their audience because they've got the big audience. Obviously, they're big, they're famous. So scooping a little bit. I do have seen some shows that they've gained a little bump in numbers because they've had a big guest on their show. But I don't think those numbers stay consistent. I think they kind of like peak for that one episode, and then the rest of that it's back to normal.
Yeah. And if they share it out on like their Instagram stories or something, that's awesome. That's like a bonus, but we can't expect that anymore with these people that like their brands are so dialed in and you may be the 10th podcast they've been on that week.
Or that day.
Yeah. And how do you keep them all straight? And like these people have giant, teams of people that handle all their social media. So it used to really kind of break my heart when I had somebody that didn't share it out. I'm like, that sucks. But I started to just understand it and just kind of dealt with it. Priority number one, deliver for the audience. So if we did that, cool. That was a cool experience. Like I had Michael Hyatt on my show. I read all his books and like, that was just a cool experience. And he did share it out, which was awesome.
Great.
But it's just like, I was at a point in my podcasting career, like, getting to talk to Michael Hyatt one-on-one for an hour. I've read all of his stuff. I buy all his stuff. He is somebody I really look up to. That is a huge win for me in and of itself. And the fact that I get to share this conversation, this moment with my entire audience, super cool. Enough said. Period. End of sentence. I don't need anything else out of Michael Hyatt. So him sharing it out was actually a bonus. Now, one strategy that you can use that tends to work, and I tend to get a lot of yeses from higher level guests, is this. On Instagram, what I'll do after I finish an interview, I'll be like, hey, this is the date that this is going to be going out. I would love to do a quick 10 to 15 minute follow-up live interview on Instagram Live the week of. What do you think? Would you be up for that? And a lot of times they say yes, because it's a follow-up interview, which is exactly what it is. And it allows them to kind of get deeper into my audience, make connections, especially if they're in promotion mode. It's like, they can sell some books, they can do whatever it is that they're promoting. But the cool thing about going live on Instagram is that, so if Chris and I go live if I go live, I pull him into my feed, push notifications are sent out in both directions to both of our audiences as if we originated the live each individually.
No way.
So yes. So if I go live, so a great example, I, using my strategy of kind of working my way up the top 200 lists, asking for warm introductions, I got introduced to a couple in the ketogenic diet space that they have 5 million YouTube subscribers. Their names are Matt and Mega from Keto for Normies. And I said, hey, great interview. Would love to do a follow-up interview. And they're like, oh yeah, let's do it. And they had at that point, they had 500,000 Instagram subscribers or followers. So we go live for 15 minutes. I got 300 new followers in 15 minutes because all those push notifications going out, and their audience looked like a stock ticker just flying through the comments. And it was nuts. And I did business for years, for like 2-3 years. I'd always ask people, where did you first hear about me? They're like, oh, I saw you on a live with Matt and Mega 3 years ago. I was like, wow. So anyway, those push notifications are legit. And that's better than them sharing it in their Instagram story or anything. They're getting a push notification. Hey, so-and-so is live. Go join their live stream. And these people that are super fans, they will do that. And all of a sudden, there you are. And you can kind of pimp out the episode, promote it a little bit, and go, hey, if you enjoy this conversation, make sure you check out episode blah, 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 of the blah, blah, blah podcast. And it works really nicely because people can just jump right into your Instagram and follow you and consume your content there. So that is an ask that I will put out there, and it's been a pretty successful strategy. So I don't even ask people to share out assets anymore. I'm like, hey, you want to go live? And I'll just leave it at that.
What about the, I've seen these two where they have like the two names or two accounts attached to one post. What's that about on Instagram? You know like a real collaboration. So if you do create like video assets or you record the video of your show, you can create a 60-second or up to 90 seconds now Instagram reel. Actually, I think we can go all the way 2 minutes now, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, you create a video clip, turn it into an Instagram reel, and you can invite the other person to be a collaborator. So it shows up in their feed as their own native post. And same thing, it'll show up in their feed to anybody that follows their account. And so that's another way where. But
they have to accept it, though, right?
They have to accept it. Yep.
Okay. If they don't accept it, then it's in the void. It's done. It's only on your show, on your side. It's only
on my side. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You have to consider, again, a lot of these people have very branded feeds. Like the only certain colors, only certain images.
No way.
Yeah.
Think about that. Yeah.
So if that doesn't fit, they will not accept the collaboration, and we just have to be okay with that. Now, another workaround around this, my friends, the Biz Bros, Luis and Fonzie, their show is awesome. It's called Content is Profit. What they do is when somebody comes to be a guest on their show, they ask them for their brand colors, their brand fonts, everything. So they have all of their branding stuff, and they will create video assets with their brand font, with their brand color, making it like undeniably shareable, to the point where when I was on their show, I've been on the show a couple different times, and I share their assets, people think that it's my brand. They're like, and it's embarrassing because they're like, I'll get comments like, wow, you've really kicked it up a notch with your stuff. I'm like, oh, unfortunately, I didn't create this. It's for someone else's show. So yeah, they really, but that's part of the business of what they do. Like that's them kind of showing other podcasters, hey, we can create assets like this for you as like a service. So, so that's one way. If you want to do the collabs on Instagram Reels, that's something that, really take brand colors, fonts, content, topics into account if you want to increase the ability for them to share that out.
So do you really just live in Instagram, or do you mess with other platforms?
Great question, Chris. And this is another of my favorite topics to talk about in the online business, online marketing spaces. I feel like when we launch a new adventure like a podcast, we have to go out and explore and fish around in different waters and see where we get some bites. Where do we get engagement? Where do we seem to speak the language the easiest? And there's just maybe a 6-month period of just like, let's put some stuff on LinkedIn. Let's put some stuff on TikTok. Let's try out YouTube. Let's try out Instagram. Let's try out Facebook. But eventually I feel like we have to pare it down to 1 to 2 platforms of choice where we found the sweet spot where we're getting engagement. You can easily create content because you understand the language that is spoken here. So it's something you can grab your phone, you don't have to think about it. You create some content, boom, it's up. Your audience is engaged and satisfied. So for me, I did this at the end of 2022. I was trying to post everywhere, and I'm like posting on Pinterest and TikTok and Facebook stories and LinkedIn and all the places. And it was taking me a lot of time, even though I'm just kind of resharing out a lot of the content. I had to make it fit, the image right, all the stuff. So it was taking me a significant amount of time. At the end of 2022, the last quarter, I go, I'm gonna do an experiment. Last quarter, I feel like Instagram is my sweet spot. I speak the language. That's where my people are showing up. I can easily create content for this. It's easy. It's lucrative. It's fun. Let's just focus on that and forget everything else. And it was a little bit scary, but what I noticed in the last quarter of the year, downloads go way up. My time that I could spend on that platform went way up, so I could actually nurture that platform even better and do more reach outs and get in the DMs and really stir things up, stir up activity. And my business really exploded. So I'm
wow,
like,
it's
okay,
great.
This is great. And I didn't have to worry about any of that other stuff anymore. So yeah, I mainly focus on Instagram. And I realize, I still get messages every once in a while. Like one of my friends messaged me, he's like, hey, I found you and I wanted to connect on LinkedIn, but you haven't accepted my friend request. Or I'm like, honestly, I deleted the LinkedIn app from my phone. I don't even know how to log in anymore. And so I just had to make a clean break on all that stuff. And there's a few little things falling out, but the benefits way outweigh any of the potential fallout from missing a few potential listeners or even clients here and there. Like the good stuff that's happening is just so much better. And I recaptured all that time, which is huge for me because really as an online entrepreneur, I view my time and my schedule as my main form of compensation. And obviously leveraging my podcast has helped me do that.
That's great, man. So, but are you ever worried about like dumping all your eggs into one basket with the Instagram?
Well, yeah, that is a concern. Like if I get my Instagram taken down, if Instagram gets banned by the government or something like that.
Yep, like TikTok.
That's of concern. But I do have seeds planted on all these other platforms. I could easily go like, all right, Instagram's gone. Let's do another 6-month round of fishing in all the waters again, and let's see where my next platform is. But really, I view my business being built on 3 brand pillars. So like one strong social media platform is one of them, but also I've still got my podcast feed, my subscribers there, and I've got a strong email list. So having those other 2 brand pillars helps me sleep at night where, a couple of years ago, we all remember the day that Facebook and Instagram both went down and nobody could post anything. But I've got, a nice, healthy email list with a 70% open rate, and I can email them and communicate there anytime that I want to. And I own that and I can do that. And I've, worked really hard to build that and nurture that list. So same thing with my podcast feed. I can drop an episode to update people. Hey, my Instagram got taken down for some reason and here's where you can connect with me next or whatever. So having those other 2 brand pillars really, that does, calm things down for me a little bit just in case.
Yeah, and I also think about the YouTuber or the YouTube, like I guess they call themselves a podcast, but they're really just dumping their show exclusively on YouTube, whether it's YouTube Live or YouTube feed or whatever it is. They're dumping everything into the YouTube basket. But I just feel like that's not a safe play. I mean, the thing about podcasting is we can be in all kinds of different places. Apple, Spotify, I would call it Joe Blow's House of Podcasts, whatever, whatever's out there. We can put our show in all these different places, which makes it better because you're dumping all your eggs into the one YouTube basket. And what if YouTube decides they don't like you? Like, what do you do then? You lose everything.
Yeah.
So, but I think what they're thinking is that if some of these YouTubers, are just massive, we're talking into the millions and maybe even billions of viewers. And I think they're so big that how can they get rid of me?
Yeah.
I'm making them so much money. And that might be the case. But I think if you start saying the wrong things on your show, it can probably get you in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a very scary thing for anybody. I think that's the beauty about podcasting. I think that the thing is too, is if all that stuff goes down, at least you still have your podcast, you still have your feed, you still have your RSS. And even if Apple and Spotify pull you down, there's an old-fashioned way to get your RSS feed into these player apps so people can still consume your stuff. It's a little old-fashioned. There's some coding you have to do. I'm not too adverse on how to do that exactly, but I do hear there's a way you can still get your podcast out to your listeners and to your audience. It's a little more work, but it still can physically be done. And that's the nice thing about a podcast versus relying on all these other platforms. The thing I was going to ask you about Instagram, have you ever noticed a click rate from putting I know they can put in stories, you can put links to things, say your podcast episodes. Have you noticed a click rate on those? Or do you even do those?
I don't pay. I do those for sure. That's one thing. As much as I focus on Instagram, I hardly ever look at my insights. Like hardly ever. Like I probably look at it twice a year, maybe. And it's just because I forget. I'm so efficient with my time and driven on efficiency. I'm like, all right, get this story up, put the link, go to the next checkbox on my list. And like, that's something that, I kind of gauge everything by my DMs. I'm like, all right.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
I posted something and I got 10 DMs off this content. Let's post more content like that. So it's actual just in my inbox results that I see where people are booking discovery sessions or they want to come on the show or whatever. Like you and I have DM'd back and forth and like, I'm pretty good about keeping up on those things. So, that's more what I focus on versus the analytics. But I recently had somebody on my show that is like an Instagram and Facebook ads specialist. And the episode hasn't gone live yet, but I've been like using some of her thoughts around looking at the insights when we run ads and stuff like that. So I think I will get more well-versed in looking at like what exactly type of information we can pull from those insights.
So have you ever ran an Instagram ad for your show?
Yes, we actually did a 1-week experiment with different types of content where, again, like Megan from Chime House Media, she set the whole thing up for me. So shout out to her. And I kind of challenged her. I was like, I really think Facebook and Instagram ads suck for podcasters. Prove me wrong. and she came on the show and she set everything up and she's like, send me this image or that. And, different types of episodes that we wanted to test. And she ran one ad that was just about engagement. So like there was an episode I wanted to promote, but it wasn't necessarily promoting like a direct link to the episode. It was more to get people just engaging in the post. And then we did one that was more like, go click on this link to listen to this episode. And then we did one to like just a lead magnet for comparison's sake. And the engagement post and the direct to episode post did really well. And I got several new listens and subscribers popping into my feed and new people, that followed my Instagram account. So I think there's hope there. And I only spent like $150, which was great because normally you think Instagram and Facebook ads, like I got to drop $1,000 on this thing to even see if it works.
Is that the going rate? I have no idea. I've never done it. I don't know.
It can be insanely expensive just because most people don't know what the heck they're doing. So that was,
okay.
That's when I see roadblocks like this in the podcasting space. And I go and I try to find experts and I go, like, it was kind of like this prove me wrong challenge I did with Megan. I'm like, hey, show me that this can be done. Create an Instagram ad campaign that is specific to promoting a podcast and or a podcast episode, and let's see what happens.
Well, that's got to be the goal to it. You have to have a specific like reason why the post exists and why should someone click on it, not versus like, here's my show today. Instagram, I'll promote this, and then hopefully see what happens, right?
Yeah. Like I've screwed around and hit the boost button every once in a while and nothing really seems to, I just gave money to Mark Zuckerberg and I'm like, oh great.
Wow. He thanked you for it, by the way.
There we go.
Yeah, I know guys on Twitter, 'cause I'm on Twitter too a lot. And on Twitter, there is a kind of a boost or a promotion feature. I've only done it a couple times. And what it does is it kind of asks you like, who is this for? It'll ask you what kind of very, very basic stuff, and then it'll ask you like, what age group is this for? And then it'll ask you like, do you want more clicks or do you want more views or do you want more followers? Like, what is your goal behind this post? And you kind of like click a few boxes and then you spend your $25 or whatever it is. And then a day later, it'll tell you the analytics. Now I've had one post, it went pretty well, but I don't think on the back end, I don't think I saw a big jump in actual like listeners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. I mean, honestly, the only ad platform that has been consistently successful for me and for growing my show, and this actually leans into the third thing I mentioned when we were talking about the 3 areas to grow your show, is podcast player app ads.
Okay.
So we can't advertise on Apple. I feel like that will eventually be a thing. But we can advertise on Spotify, but they only do audio ads. And it's a little bit complicated because there's more variables. I like to get into the other podcast players' Like I love the Overcast FM platform, and Overcast is a podcast player app that a lot of like Android users will use. And you can go on there and create a banner ad for cheap. Like I just ran one that was like $120 for a month. And I think I got 25 new subscribers or something like that. Like subscribers,
so what does it look
not
like?
downloads.
What does it look like and how does it work? Like what is a banner ad? Is it just like a picture of your podcast?
Yeah. So it's super simple. Like honestly, Chris, you could have it set up in 5 minutes or less. That's how simple this is compared to Facebook, where it's like, and what's the ethnicity of your ideal listener, and like all this weird stuff. Yeah. So it's really super simple. So the website is overcast.fm/ads. And when you guys go there, you will see like a chart, and it is all the pricing is based off of volume and interest. So they sell 5 ads per category, and you'll see the categories that we're all listed in, like true crime, news, business, education, health, like all the podcasting categories. And basically you pick a category, and whatever the current price is, you basically go, okay, I'm going to pay that price, and you get a banner ad for the next 30 days for that category. So if people are listening, you buy a health banner ad, then people are listening to health podcasts, your banner ad pops up. And the banner ad itself is super simple. They pull your podcast art from your RSS feed. So that's boom, done. And then you get like a line and a half of text. And that's the only thing you got to think about and make count. So what is the tagline or the phrase that you're going to put in there to make sure that when that banner pops up, it catches the interest of your ideal listener? So that's the only thing. There's no other targeting, no nothing. You pay, you put your line and a half in, you enter your credit card information, and then your ad runs for 30 days.
30 whole days?
Yeah. And they track your how many people saw the banner, how many people tapped on the banner, and how many people actually hit the subscribe button on their platform.
No way. So
it's awesome.
Now when I think of banner ads, I think of like a little sliver on the top of the phone.
Yeah.
Top. Is it the full? It's the full thing. It's just a sliver part.
It's like it probably covers a fifth of the screen on the phone or something like that, but it's big enough to read. Like it slides up there.
Okay.
And that's why like your podcast art needs to be dialed in too. All these people that have little tiny italicized text on their podcast art, that's not good for this type of an ad. Like that's why I'm always like, I don't put my face on there. I put big, thick, chunky letters. I want it really easy to read on a tiny phone screen.
Did you make your artwork yourself, or you hire somebody to do it?
Oh yeah, I'm a Canva nerd, man. I love messing around.
Look at you. Yeah, I made mine in Canva too. Check that out.
It's the best. So yeah, like that slides across the screen. I mean, just imagine, like I run a lot of ads in the business category, and they're listening to Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn, and all of a sudden across the top slides Podcasting Business School, tips for podcasts, monetization, growth, and engagement. That's about all I can fit in there. They click on the banner, they can download some episodes, hit the subscribe button, and all of a sudden instead of running an Instagram ad on a platform where the person that sees it may not even know what a podcast is, versus someone listening in the category that I'm in, they can click on it and start listening to my show. That's way more cost effective. And it
reminds me of what YouTube does. You ever watch YouTube when you're watching a video and like some obscure video that you're not subscribed to will be in the right corner over there. Yeah. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I want to check that out.
Yeah. Same thing.
Oh, that's fancy. Is it $150 you said?
Well, the pricing is dependent on the category, and it's demand based. So they allow 5 ads to run at once in one category, so that their feed isn't saturated with like 1,000 people trying to run ads in the business category. So you'll see when you go to that website, you have the category, the current price, how many ad spaces are available. So if it's like 2 or 1, it's probably a pretty high price. If it's 5, that's probably the lowest price you're going to see for a minute. So I'd jump on that. And then they have a projected range of how many subscribers you'll get on average when you run this ad. So it might be like,
really?
Yeah, subscribers. So it'll be like 50 to 75, 75 to 100, 20 to 25. Different categories have different, and they're updated with every single ad. It's just like in the algorithm, and they've got a formula. Each ad they run, they update it based off of the analytics. So it's super cool. And, I usually shoot for, if I can pay $7 or less per new subscriber, I'm pretty happy. If I pay $5 or less, I'm really happy. So if I pay $500 and I get 100 subscribers out of that deal, subscribers, not just downloads. These are people that are hitting the subscribe button, because you'll get downloads too. You'll have people that will tap on that banner and they don't ever hit the subscribe button, but they listen to lots and lots of episodes. Like I've got shows that I listen like that. I don't hit subscribe, but I kind of cherry pick which episodes I want to listen to. So you're still getting a ton of downloads out of it. But the actual subscriber count is tracked, and it's really cool. So this is one of my favorite ways. I always have an ad running on Overcast in different categories. Because the other thing, Chris, you have to, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent on this, but it's really effective. But like the other thing you have to consider is what other categories of podcasts do your ideal listener listen to outside of your category? So for me, I just ran a sports category ad, and my show has nothing to do with sports, but I know a lot of sports podcasters are interested in podcasting, or sports podcast listeners are interested in starting their own show. So I do really well in the sports category. I do really well in the news category. I do really well in the true crime category. So think about those like tangential interest groups with those other types of shows, and you can run ads in there too.
So what do you think is like, what categories are worth more than other categories?
Well, obviously, like your home-based categories are the most value to you, because it'll be different for every show. So for people like us, I would look at obviously business. I would look at education. I've done really well with my education ads on that platform. And then you branch out into like what just kind of everybody listens to, like news. True crime has a really high volume, comedy, and sports. So those are the categories that I run ads in. And like I'll get the most subscribers from a business or education ad, but my cost per new subscriber in those other categories tends to be pretty good too. And I just kind of wait until I see the price that I want, and I'll jump on it.
Nice. So you kind of like playing the market. It's like watching the cheapest gas around town, trying to find the right place to buy gas. So, Adam, I have a question about podcasting in general. So what would you think would make a good podcast versus a bad podcast in your mind?
Well, I think that if the podcast serves the podcaster's why, and it focuses on serving the audience with the content, that's a great podcast. And it doesn't matter like whether it makes money or if it's a hobby or whatever, because some people do want to use a podcast to grow their business. That's their why. And if they can do that and serve their ideal audience, home run. Other people want to get with their buddies and drink some beers and do the podcast Wayne's World style in their basement.
Yes.
And they want to have fun. And if somebody ever emails them ever in their life and like, I listen to the show, they're like, winning. That's awesome. So that, like, I feel like if the why behind the show is aligned with who you're trying to impact and both those parties are satisfied, you can check both those boxes, then you've got a great freaking show and you should stick with it. And it's serving you. And, podcasting can be a hobby. It can be an artistic, creative release, just like painting, just like writing. We're creating something and putting it out there. And that, for a lot of people, is probably good enough. Like they don't have to go out and make a bunch of money doing it. They're getting that creative release out of it. So we need to be aware of that. And, that's a great reason to podcast.
So what do you think would be a horrible podcast?
I think in the scenario where it's kind of like blending what I just said for the wrong reason. So people are like, you know what? Let's just get together and drink some beers in the basement, and I bet you we make a bunch of money. Like that's a bad podcast. So they're looking to just screw around, and like we're entertaining, we're funny, we're cool. There's 5 of us. It's bound to work.
Yeah,
just
we're
like
all
Joe
drunk,
Rogan.
We're all drunk and making each other laugh, but the audience isn't laughing.
Exactly. It won't take any effort. Let's just see what happens.
Let's keep it real, man.
Yeah. Those are the shows where they screw around for 8 episodes and then quit, and we never see them again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I know that I think it was the last number I saw. There was like 4 million podcasts or 3 million, but not of those numbers. I think of ones that are actually making shows today, currently, it's got to be somewhere in the 500,000, maybe even less than that.
Yeah.
It's not as much as you think about, because everybody thinks there's so many podcasts out there. But one thing, I did an episode on this yesterday, I think about it, about trying to make your podcast sound a little different than everybody else's podcast. Because I do know that there's a lot of these movie review shows, movie style podcasts and things like that and stuff. So really quickly, what would be a good strategy to keep your show different than the pack?
Yeah, I've got what I hope is a unique answer for this. So I'm a big fan of pulling audience audio clips into your show. And I feel like anytime you can make your audience a part of your show, it always makes it stand out. You always develop super fans and you're going to get better audience engagement. Because imagine like a show that you listen to and they're like, hey, use this link to submit your favorite episode recommendation, and you do it, and then you hear your audio on your favorite show. Like you're gonna fanboy out, like, oh my God, there it is. Like I just said that, I'm on the show. So I like to do this with my show. I like to recommend that people do this. Like in my show right now, in the intro, I will include a client testimonial. So I'll take one of my coaching clients, have them submit some audio. I use SpeakPipe. It's free. And they just get a link. They can record it up into the cloud. I can use it whenever I want. And I'll put a testimonial in the intro, and they get to shout out their show, of course. That's beneficial to them. And then the outro, as soon as I sign off for my main part of the episode, I will have a listener submit an episode recommendation of my show. So they get to shout out their show. So they'll be like, this is XYZ from the XYZ podcast. My favorite episode of Podcasting Business School is episode blah, 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 because whatever. And that is expert positioning. It creates a bingeability factor where people hear that other person, not me, recommending another episode. They're more likely to go check out that episode if that topic piques their interest. So doing that, pulling the audience onto the show in any way, shape, or form, it makes you stand out. And every super fan that you build is worth 10 casual listeners.
Yeah, I'd rather have 10 super fans than 1,000 just randos just stumbling by your show and just pressing play for a little bit and sampling it. Well, Adam, this has been so fantastic. You dropped so much gold on the show today. I really appreciate this, man. So where can everybody find out all about you and all your wonderful stuff?
Yes, sir. So you mentioned earlier, Instagram is the only place I hang out on social media. So if you're like on Pinterest pinning away, like I wish I could find Adam, I'm not going to be there. Sorry. But you can find me on Instagram at Podcasting Business School. And then my website is podcastingbusiness.school. And my podcast is Podcasting Business School. So come hang out and come on over to my house and play, and we'll see if we can help you level up your show.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, you have a fantastic rest of your week, man.
Chris, I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your platform with me. It's always an honor. And for everybody that's listening to the show, if you have not yet hit that subscribe and or follow button, go and do that right now and leave a glowing rating and review wherever you listen to it. And maybe mention this episode as your favorite. I don't know.
That's great, man. Hey, thank you once again for listening. You know what? If you have any problems creating your podcast, maybe you need some one-on-one help to figure out the problems maybe you're dealing with, you always email me at podtasticaudio@gmail.com, and I will respond with my best answers trying to figure out the problems that you might be having with your show. And I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for listening.